I want to talk more about surrender and specifically what it means to relax. It's an interesting characteristic of the mind that it can take anything and turn it into a dilemma. And it's not surprising, especially when it comes to self-inquiry and surrender, that it does this because both self-inquiry and surrender are only seeming effortful processes. What they really are is that they are ways of aligning ourselves with a truth that goes beyond a process. It seems effortful, but the end of that effort will be the recognition that the activity was in fact simply our very nature. And this is certainly very true of surrender, which I often define as ignoring all thought except the thought of surrender. Vigilantly maintaining one's attention so as to continue to ignore thought, and relaxing. And ignoring more and relaxing more. And then when one comes to a certain stillness, to ask the question, who is the surrenderer? Or to long for the completion of the surrender. And that's when one is subject to be taken by something beyond the mind. But before that point, there's this issue of ignoring all thought and relaxing. And the relaxing portion really isn't necessarily critical to the surrender instruction. The surrender instruction can be put in different ways, and different phrasings appeal to different people. Ramana Maharishi famously said in Tamil, Chumma ira, which means just be. And I always say the emphasis is on the just, not the be, but the just, as in stop pretending that you are a body and a mind and that you are subject to the positive and negative consequences of your body and mind's activities. And therefore, just be, because being isn't something you need to actively do. You simply need to stop doing all the other pretending. Sometimes surrender is defined like that. I like to define it as ignore and relax. It could also be defined as simply ignore all thought except that thought of surrender. But I want to talk about this relaxing point. What does it mean to relax exactly? And I view it in a way as something that we all know intuitively, and that the mind can make complicated because it doesn't want to relax. But that said, it's like the center of a pendulum. There are activities where when you pursue them, it feels like you're putting in this deliberate, tense effort towards or away from something. That you're initiating some kind of activity. If it feels like you are initiating some kind of activity, then dropping that effort is relaxation. Now, on the other hand, there are activities which may go on automatically and involuntarily, and in those cases, relaxation may be not interfering with them, meaning not trying to stop them. If you try to stop them, that's the effort. That's the deliberate, interfering effort that feels like I am doing something. That's what we're trying to drop. So on one hand, starting new kinds of actions in a way that feels effortful. On the other hand, stopping certain actions, which are just going by themselves, that could be the problematic kind of effort. And relaxation is relaxing and doing neither of those two things. In that sense, it's sort of the still center point of the pendulum. It just sort of centers at that middle. Neither this nor that. Both a choice to initiate some new activity or a choice to stop or alter an activity that is already in progress. If those decisions are taken by what feels like you, then that would be the kind of effort that we want to relax. So note, relaxation is not in contrast to mental and physical activity. It's not about stopping mental and physical activity. What it is about stopping only that piece of mental and physical activity that feels like you are deliberately, effortfully doing something, interfering in the status quo of the flow of mental and physical events that are already started. If in the moment you see something on the table and you decide, I'm going to pick it up, and it feels like I'm going to pick it up, I'm deciding to pick it up, that would be something that would be subject to relaxation. At the same time, you suddenly find yourself reaching toward the box and picking it up. Now, at that point, if you deliberately, rigidly want to force yourself not to pick up the box, that would be against relaxation. In both cases, the question is, where is the sense of you, of youership, you might say, the sense that you are acting? If it feels like you are being burdened by this effort, that effort has to be dropped, which is another way of saying dropping tension, All the changes in the mind and body can go on, as it were, without you. The moment it feels like you are getting involved, drop it. Drop the tension. Drop only the tension that feels like you. That little portion that feels like you. Drop that. Drop towards relaxation. So it happens at the physical level, right, where mentioned going for an object or stopping yourself going for an object could be non-relaxation, depending on the context. Breathing is something that happens involuntarily. Now, if you deliberately stop your breath, if it feels like you are the one stopping your breath, that would be non-relaxation, so drop the effort. But if you find yourself, for example, holding your breath, and that action seems to be going on very naturally, and it feels like it would be an effort to stop that action, then in that case, that would be the effort. So it's all contextual, Now, a warning, this does not necessarily mean that you should be trying to logically evaluate, is this relaxation? Is that relaxation? Is this more towards stopping the flow of events? Is that more towards, what feels like me? This is a nest of contradictions for the mind. You can feel directly, just in the same way that you feel your hand. Is it tense or not? Move towards lower tension. Move towards lower tension to the extent that you are able. Move towards the lowest tension of which you are capable. If you go too far in the opposite direction, tension will increase. So move towards the lowest state of tension. Move towards it physically, move towards it attentionally, right? So again, if your attention moves towards an object deliberately and feels like I am focusing on something other than surrender, that would be non-relaxation. But let's say a fire engine blaring with its sirens comes by and your mind is automatically drawn to give it attention. It would be non-relaxation to wrench your mind away and deliberately try to block that out somehow. That would be kind of a violent, deliberate, effortful gesture. And that would be an increase of tension. So drop that tension, right? Same is true with decisions. If it feels like you're making this heavy, effortful, exhausting decision, that's non-relaxation. Drop the effort associated with that. Now you're in relaxation. But if a decision is already happening, it takes place, it just has arisen, as it were, by itself. If you're charging in and saying, no, I'm not going to make a decision because I want to relax, well, that's actually against the principle of relaxation in that case, right? Why? Because that's stopping that decision in that case. That's what's taking the feeling of your effort, of your doing, of your interfering. That's ratcheting up the tension in your system. And again, don't be drawn into evaluating all this logically. You know what relaxation is. You know what tension is. Drop the tension. Let the flow of events go by as it will, and don't interfere. Don't pay any attention, and don't interfere. Don't try to change it one way or the other. Don't try to stop it. Don't try to start it. Allow it to be as long as it doesn't require anything of you. To the extent that it requires anything of what feels like you drop effort. Ignore and drop effort. That's the heart of relaxation in surrender. And what is it really speaking to? It's speaking to the fact that we think that we are the doers. That's why we're burdened with it. But in fact, we're not. We are the self, which is beyond all these images of doing and experiencing. All these images, if they exist at all, exist simply as mirages within the space of the self. Self does not act, and you are the self. So therefore, since you don't act, why take on the burden of pretending that you do? You have no share in action, you have no decision, you have no control, except as a seeker to surrender. But what really is surrender? Surrender is simply actually accepting the bliss, the peace, the beauty of your non-doing. It's aligning yourself with that fact and ceasing to identify with the false belief that you can interfere in any way. There's no interference. There's no possible interference. So therefore, just relax. When you relax, whatever happens, happens. And in fact, even if you didn't relax, whatever happens, happens. So therefore, drop deliberate effort to change things either way, either towards action or away from action. Ignore all thought except the thought of surrender. And as Ramana Maharishi would say, just be.